Enterprise AI is an operating problem. It's not a technology problem. We used to ship code, now we ship intent. And that's what agentic systems really do. You describe the what, they figure out the how.
Well, welcome back to Ctrl+alt+disrupt, the podcast where we cut through the noise and get to what's actually working in enterprise technology. Right now, AI is everywhere. Every organization has pilots, proofs of concepts, and bold ambitions. But when you look a little closer, most of those efforts haven't translated to real scaled impact. So the question is, why? What is actually holding enterprises back and moving beyond experimentation? And more importantly, what does it really take to build AI that works in production, at scale, and in the real world? I'm Stephanie Rosenfeld, your host, and the head of Global Content and Corporate Communications at UST. And today, I'm joined by Adnan Masood, UST's Chief AI Architect. Adnan has been working in the intersection of AI, enterprise systems, and real-world deployment. Adnan, it's great to have you here.
Thanks, Stephanie. Really happy to be here. Hi, everyone. Exciting times to be in AI. Hyperscaler CapEx is running at numbers that would have sounded absurd 2 years ago. The frontier models, the largest generation from the major labs, genuinely surprise me every quarter. And the conversations I'm having with CIOs and CTOs have completely shifted from should we to how fast we can get this done. This is the most interesting moment of my career, and I have been in this field for a long time. I've got a new book on agentic AI coming out this summer with Heather Daw. And honestly, I can't write fast enough to keep up with the field. So this is the right moment for us to have this conversation. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah, that's exactly why we asked you here. So I'm going to lead you with a softball question, but it's actually not such a softball question. What is the real story in enterprise AI right now?
That's a tough question. And the honest story is that we are in the largest gap I have ever seen between the capability and adoption. The models are extraordinary. The deployments, for the most part, are not. So you probably have seen, and this has been very popular, the MIT NANDA report, which quoted everywhere. It has the famous 95% number, the most Gen AI pilots fail to deliver. And people tend to throw it around like a meme. What they really leave out is why. The report doesn't say that technology failed. I mean, it low-key does, but it says that the deployment failed. Like that capability is not the same as deployment. That distinction is the entire conversation we are going to have. And if you see at real numbers coming from my world, I was with the CIO of a very large organization a few years ago, a manufacturing company, and they had 47 active Gen AI pilots going on. 47, right? So I asked him how many were in production. So he paused and he did math in his head, and then he said two. And those two are chatbots. So, as we say here in the South, bless their heart. Uh, and these chatbots barely count. So that is an industry pattern. McKinsey, Gartner, BCG, every major survey lands in the same place. Somewhere between 10 and 20% of the Gen AI initiatives ever reach production. And my field number is honestly lower. So are we further along than it seems in capability? Absolutely. We are definitely out there in capability, and that capability overhang is there. In enterprise operating maturity, we are early. So there's that gap. So what I'm seeing is a pilot proliferation without production discipline.
Right.
Everyone is experimenting. Very few have built the muscle to turn an experiment into something that really runs on a Tuesday morning when the data engineer is on vacation. So there's a phrase I have started with, pilot purgatory. It's not a metaphor anymore. It's an operating state we are in.
So what's causing that big gap that we're not getting past the pilot stage?
The reason why this progress is stalling, and it's like I said, it's almost never a technology problem. If your pilot is stalled, it's not the model. And I say that knowing that there's a religious war going on there. People get emotionally attached to like GPT versus Claude versus Gemini. And the way they used to fight about, Vim versus Emac, that's a programming reference. So I'm not litigating it today. We don't have insurance for that conversation. What actually is killing pilots is the same four things: fragmented data, no clear owner, no evaluation discipline, and the one nobody wants to talk about is nobody redesigned the workflow. But let me unpack the eval discipline for us for a second because it really matters. When I say evals, I mean the test suite for your AI. The same way you would have unit tests for traditional code, right? A golden data set of input with known good outputs, your automated checks running on every change, plus human review for the things which automation can't really catch, right? So this eval driven development is becoming what test driven development was 15 years ago. And vibe based evaluation is not really evaluation, it's hoping for the best outcome. So I don't really prefer just running on vibes because then you get a code which is not going to run in production. The most underestimated blocker by a mile is a workflow redesign. So I was working with a very large insurance company, and they have deployed a beautiful claims summarization model, 93% accuracy on a golden data set. 6 months in, the adjusters were still copy pasting into their old workflow. And the reason was that nobody has touched the process. The model is working, but the system isn't. If you're still using that legacy copy paste process, then having that model out there is not really going to help. So, I mean, Peter Drucker famously said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. I think in enterprise AI, workflow eats model for breakfast every time. And honestly, when I'm talking to leaders, the thing which is front and center on their mind is which model should we pick? No, this is not a question you should be asking. You should be asking about the things I've just described earlier about eval harnesses, about workflow redesign, about how you're going to test AI.
So with that in mind, what's the first step for our leaders? What's the first thing they should focus on to get to that golden ticket place of pilots working?
Pick a workflow with three properties. Three properties. Number one, quantifiable pain. Number two, a committed business owner. Number three, reachable data. If any of these are missing, your pilot will not scale. It's quite simple. It might demo really well, it might win an internal award, it would not scale. The pressure test I typically give every leader who walks into my office is I pick their approach apart. And this is something that I picked up at HBS, where the case method really drills the discipline into you. Before you write a line of code, finish the sentence. Will we will reduce X by Y% for business, and the business unit is Z by quarter end. So you need to finish up this sentence, like write it down. We will reduce X by Y% for business unit Z by quarter end. Can you do that? If you cannot write that sentence, you don't have a case. You have curiosity, which is fine. It will be funded as research, but please don't fund it or label it as a transformation because it is not. The better test, the one I actually prefer, is imagine a pilot succeeding exactly as designed. What changes on Monday then? If the answer is, well, we have a very nice demo for the board, and then you walk away, that's not really something you have done any in terms of transformation. The answer for that, the question you're asking, Stephanie, is around the what happens is the team job changes. Did the metric move? The cost line shrink? Now you have something which is really worth building. So there's a concept in the AI world, or actually in Silicon Valley, we call it model market fit. I kind of play on the product market fit, which means that does this model applied to this workflow actually move a metric somebody cares about? Right? It does this model. If you're applying this model to a workflow, is it actually moving a metric? So most pilots are what we call PMF. They haven't found their fit yet. And the honest move is to keep iterating on the use case, not to keep scaling the deployment. So you start with a workflow that has a strong baseline. If you don't know what the human only process costs today, you will have no way to prove the ROI later, right? Because you don't really know, yeah, it costs $100,000 with a human, and how would it, if it gets automated and it gets modernized, what would be the ROI? I see this constantly. Like teams sprint to deploy AI, and a year later, nobody can prove it did anything because nobody measured it that before. So that before and after is quite important.
So, Adnan, you mentioned that we're a little over indexing on models, and that's where the focus is, but not where it should be. So, where should we be going, and what should we be looking at more than the model itself?
So from pilot to scale, there are four stages. There's strategy, there's value, there's production, and then finally scale. So that is the backbone of what I now call AI DLC, or AI development lifecycle, as compared to how we used to have the software development lifecycle, or SDLC. And most organizations skip the strategy part to production, and then they're stunned like when scale never happens. So teams break at true transitions: demo to pilot, pilot to production. The demo works. Why? Because you cherry pick the inputs. We have all done it. When the pilot exposes the long tail, the edge cases, the dirty data, the user typing in all caps from their phone and on an Uber, you know, then suddenly your 95% accuracy becomes 73%. And now the board and the steering committee is staring you down and like asking these pointed questions. So what changes from demo to production is everything operational. You have eval harnesses, you have regression tests, you have observability, you have to have cost telemetry in place. What is going to be a fallback path if the happy path doesn't work out? How about human in the loop when the risk is demanding, right? What about prompt versioning? What about drift detection? What about red teaming? Security review, on-call rotations. Like none of this is glamorous, so it's not as hard for people to talk about it. Right, but all of this is really necessary. So if we really need to talk about the important things, and there's a real economic concept here: the productivity J curve. Like you take the productivity hit before you take the productivity gain. So if you look at the HAI's recent report on how the AI productivity works, is essentially a J curve. A team gets slower for a quarter or two as the new workflow gets built and the eval infrastructure goes in. And the leader who don't understand the J curve panic and kill the project right before the inflection. The J curve is real. Like you have to plan for it and you have to communicate it upward so people realize how it works. And this is exactly where the agentic AI culture, starts to bite you. Like the describing what you want in the natural language and letting the model write the code, the vibe coding part, is incredible. It's the future of how a lot of software gets built, but you cannot vibe code your way to production in regulated enterprise. The vibes are great for prototyping, but you gotta actually have to understand the guardrails around it, right? So anyone can prototype, almost nobody can finish. And that is the whole game right now.
So, Adnan, does model choice matter most, or are we over indexing on that?
We are definitely massively over indexing on model choice. Like
Thought so.
picking a foundation model because of the feature parity we have. Picking a foundation model in 2026 interestingly feels to me like a less like a strategic decision and more like picking a soft drink. Like they're all great, pick one, move on. What actually matters more in the order: your data and your retrieval layer, your evaluation, your observability stack, your control plane, your routing, your cost management, your governance layer, all above the model. Right? So RAG, you must have heard of it. It's a very popular acronym. Retrieval augmented generation is just a fancy term to let your model look things up before it answers instead of just relying purely on what it was trained on. Grounding is the same idea. Grounding is the same idea in a different clothing. You anchor your model's output on your real data. So if your retrieval is bad, no model can save you. I tell clients constantly, you don't have a model problem, you have a context engineering problem, which used to be called prompt engineering. Now the field has grown up, so context is the new compute. And the control plane is where the next 2 years of enterprise maturity will happen. Multimodal architectures will become the default. The cheap, fast model, what we would call a commodity tier model, will handle the common path, but the expensive reasoning model will handle the hard cases. We were going to talk about inference economics. Basically, what it costs you per call will become a serious line item once you are at a scale. Right? Imagine it's only costing a few cents, but when you are scaling it, you are not really picking a model. You're picking a model strategy. So it also depends on what hyperscaler are you using. Are there native support built into this hyperscaler, which gives you a lot more than picking a different model? So that also is a part of that model strategy. So we work very closely with major hyperscalers, AWS, GCP, Azure. And as a Microsoft regional director, I get a pretty good view across the stack. And the honest read is that the platforms are converging. The differentiation is increasingly in the workflow layer, not necessarily in the model layer. And as it's famously being said, that taste is the only moat left. Whoever has the best instinct for which problems to solve and how to solve them, that's the person who wins.
Okay, so I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. You mentioned agents, and everybody's mentioning agents right now. So, what is real and what's a little premature?
Agents are real, their hype is real. The trick is telling them apart. So, quick definition: what is an agent? An agent is a system that doesn't really just suggest, it's not a chatbot. It actually goes and does things. It plans, it uses tools, it takes actions, it iterates. And agentic workflows are the workflows where the chunks of work are handed off to those systems with some level of autonomy. Calling something an agent in 2026 is like calling something cloud native in 2014. Everyone says it, very few mean the same thing. So this word agent is doing a lot of work. So what is real today? Narrow, well-scoped agents in defined domains with good tools and good guardrails. That's real. Coding agents, for example, right? I use them daily. They are transforming how engineering happens. Now we have research agents that query, synthesize, do the citation. There's customer service triage agents which handle the first turns and route well. What is premature? Um, fully autonomous, long horizon agents running critical business processes end to end. That is still a research problem, and people are trying to dress it up as a product. And we have seen failure of companies who have tried to do that. The reliability just isn't there. The observability isn't there. The failure modes like goal misgeneralization, and the agent technically does what you asked, but not what you meant. Uh, these are not really well understood areas yet, especially in a regulated environment. The blast radius for an agent that goes off a script is much bigger than Copilot giving you a bad suggestion and you are saying, hey, no, this is not right. Agents actually do things, right? So assistants are suggesting, co-pilots collaborate, agents act. That's really the key difference. So assistants working with assistant, getting suggestions, collaborating with co-pilots, and acting with agents are three completely different things. And most enterprises are still maturing their co-pilots, and they're jumping straight into fully agentic system because I saw a demo, it was incredible, is how you end up in pilot purgatory with a much bigger blast radius and a much angrier general counsel. We used to ship code, now we ship intent, and that's what agentic systems really do. You describe the what, they figure out the how, and this is really powerful and dangerous in roughly equal measures.
So, what is the biggest failure that you're seeing right now, given all that you've just mentioned?
Oh, this is where should we start? How much time you have? There are there are typically five failure modes. Like I see them constantly, and that's the taxonomy I work with. So not having evaluation baseline, so no eval, so you don't able to test. No business owner, no integration plan, scope creep, and wrong metric. These are the five failure modes I constantly see. So strong pilots fail in production because the conditions that make the pilot succeed don't survive contact with the real organization, with the real world. Pilots have really motivated users. They have clean data. They have an engineer who's just sitting there fixing things. Production has busy users. They have messy data. The engineer is now on three other projects. So system has to be robust in the absence of its parents. That's called the agentic parents, right? So ROI is the second major thing. It's a credibility problem is where people measure the wrong things. Tokens consumed, queries served, how many monthly active users are there. The token consumed is a KPI, it's not a bill. Like we are doing token maxing a lot, but the value is the cycle time reduced. How much is the deflection rate? What is the revenue per rep? What is the cost per transaction? What is the time to resolution? Like these are the real value metrics.
Right.
Metrics which are already on a business unit scorecard. So if your AI initiative isn't moving a metric somebody is already measuring, you don't have an ROI story. You just have a feature. And the CFO test, right? It's very brutal and it's very useful. If you took this away tomorrow, what gets worse? If you take this agent away, by how much and who notices? If nobody notices, it wasn't really a ROI play, it was a theater. So we use this law here. It's called Goodhart's law. It's a famous law in Silicon Valley. When a measure becomes a target, it stops being a good measure. Which means the minute you can tell a team they'll be measured on AI adoption, they will adopt AI brilliantly and accomplish nothing. So measure becomes the business outcome, and then the adoption follow.
So you touched on it, right? ROI is what all of our business leaders are going to care most about. So let's end with this. If we had to distill this whole talk down to one thing that a C-suite leader needs to know about enterprise AI, what is it?
The bottom line, the main thing, the main topic, enterprise AI is an operating problem. It's not a technology problem. The models are there, organizations mostly aren't. So closing that gap is the work of the next 2 to 3 years, and the winners will be the people who will treat that as a discipline rather than a moment. I think that is a key takeaway I would give. What would you do differently starting tomorrow? Three things. Pick one workflow, and with a real pain and a committed business owner, just one. Go deep, don't go wide. Build your eval harness before your application. You cannot ship what you cannot measure. That's a very obvious thing, and lot of people ignore that. And stop separating the AI team from the business. I think this is a very common problem people have. Your engineers, your domain experts, and operators have to be at the same table from day one. I was having a conversation with this large enterprise leader, and we were talking about who should get AI within his organization. And I asked him, who should get internet within your organization? And they were like, he first thought it was a rhetorical question, and then it dawned on him that this is how AI is embedded within your workflows. And this is quite important that we realize that we cannot stop separating the AI teams from the business. They are now integrated, and AI is integrated as part of your business workflow. So it's important that we are genuinely curious enough to keep learning and disciplined enough to keep shipping. And this combination is really a critical one. We can outsource our thinking, but we cannot outsource our judgment and our understanding. And it's critical that whenever the business leaders are thinking about AI transformation, they do these three key things: pick one workflow, build their evaluation harness, and stop separating the AI team from the business teams.
Adnan, thank you. This was a really grounded perspective. And I think the big takeaway here is that enterprise AI isn't failing because of the models. It's failing because, as you said, we're not building the systems, the workflows, and the operating discipline around it all. So if you get that right, you focus on real workflows, measurable value, and building for production from the start, AI actually starts to scale. So thank you for breaking that down for us and making it so clear. And thank you to everyone listening. If this episode helped you think a little differently about where you are in your AI journey, share it with your team, because these are exactly the conversations that organizations need to be having right now. Thank you for joining us on Ctrl+alt+disrupt, and be sure to follow us on ust.com and wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.